Hi, everyone. Today, let's talk about Tesla Investor Day. Then we'll talk about the economic calendar just for a moment. Then we have a couple of charts to go over. Then we'll take a look at my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Tesla Investor Day is going on right now. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet, so we don't know all the details, but there's definitely a lot of speculation. There's talks about new batteries, battery replacements, potentially even a new car, the Model 2. And there's certainly talks about at least seeing pictures of the Model 2 and reduced costs for the Model 3. So lots of different things on what could potentially come out of this Investor Day. Elon Musk needs to deliver. Everyone is usually pretty hyped for Investor Day. And if it doesn't come back as expected, we could see Tesla go down tomorrow. Looking at the article, they talk about previous Investor Days where they talked about solar roofs, expanded product line, continuing to develop safe driving, and potentially making your car into a profit model for you as a driverless taxi. One of the big things ahead of this Investor Day is that Tesla is going to open a gigafactory in Mexico, which generally reduces costs. It's obviously cheaper to hire people in Mexico than it is in the United States. And then they mentioned the fact that 3 years ago, Elon did mention a $25,000 vehicle. This is expected to be the Model 2. There's various opinions on whether that'll be announced today, but people think it could happen. And then they talk about reducing costs in order to increase margins and potentially lowering the cost overall of the Model 3, just so they're a little bit more available to the average car buyer. It'll definitely be interesting to see what comes out of it, and it will affect the markets. So keep an eye on this going into Investor Day right now. Looking at the economic calendar for tomorrow, we do have U.S. revisions to Q4 production, GDP announcements, definitely interesting. It would be nice to see these go down similar to inflation. That's generally good for markets. So keep an eye on these early tomorrow before market open. Next week, just for a glimpse here, we have factory orders. Consumer credit is interesting here. And then we have the unemployment report, always very interesting on Friday next week. So actually not a lot going on next week, but do keep an eye on factory orders and the unemployment rate. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the monthly chart here on the S&Ps, I just want to highlight this monthly close here. You can see it looks very weak, big wick to the upside through that 410 level. This is a very weak close, very similar to what we had here in August, and you can see what happened the next month. It was very bearish. So do keep an eye on this. Of course, we did break out of this downtrend line, and we're not retesting that quite yet here on the monthly chart. So that could certainly be an area where we do maybe overthrow that, find some support, and then move higher from there. But this close on the monthly chart is very weak, and we have to recognize that. The next month could certainly be something like we had here in September based on what we saw in August and February. To the hourly chart, I do want to highlight some of the changes here. So I do have a volume profile looking for where the most trading was done at which prices. I did also add volume here on the bottom just to give me a better idea of where the stock is trading. You can see tons of volume done here between 401 and 395, basically this whole area. Gap here in the middle, and then lots of volume done between 415 and 409 basically. So really, we're looking to see if we can hold above 400 if we do get a little bit of a bounce. If we do get above 400, then you're looking to about 407 as your next level of resistance back in this previous bottom here. And then 410 to 412 would be your next upper zone. Interestingly, here on the hourly chart, we did see a pretty decent amount of volume here today. You can see not a lot of volume yesterday or the day before, but today we had some pretty decent volume spikes. Similar levels that we had here at the close on Friday, which did give us a nice spike into the Monday open. And you can see we saw that here in the first candle of the day, ended up being a wick rejection to the downside as we tested the previous low from Friday. And then similarly at the close here, you can see another decent amount of volume coming in. We tested the low from Friday multiple times, and it did hold today. So we're watching that going into tomorrow's session, sitting at 394. If we do get below 394 and hold, then do have some potential downside to go. Like we talked about before, this is the major trend line on this upward channel that we have right now. If 394 breaks down, then we're going to be looking at this trend not being intact anymore. Of course, we could overshoot it, come down and retest these lower levels of support and get back into this zone. Always that's a risk. But right now, you would like 394 to hold, continue to stay in this zone, and then we look for a push back up to maybe right at the top of this volume range. And like I said, if we can get out of this volume range, at least the way that I'm using it, then we're looking for a push back up to 405 in this next volume node, which also correlates with the 144 EMA and 200 SMA here. Overall, looks like we're going to bounce, looks slightly bullish into the close, but remember, this is still a structural downtrend in an overall bullish trend, so we do have mixed signals for sure, but at least in the short term looks moderately bullish. Moving over to the NASDAQ on the 15-minute and the 1 hour. This is the Heikin-Ashi chart as well versus the candlestick chart. This is another thing that I'm experimenting with here, but it does seem to be fairly valuable. And once again, here you can see into the close, it looked slightly bullish on the 15. We got one candle of green price action after hours here on the hourly. You would like to see this flip over to green early in tomorrow's session to get a push back up to maybe 293. That is the downtrend line. That's basically the center point of this move down so far. Seems like we could pretty easily get back up to that level, at least for a retest. If we can get above it and hold, then we're looking for probably 298 as your next level of take profit at the maximum back in this zone here, going back to Thursday and Friday on the 23rd and 24th. I also want to highlight the money supply index that I have on here. It's very similar to RSI, but it does factor in volume at least a little bit, giving you a better perspective on some of the price moves. And you can see here we did have divergence on the 15-minute where we got to oversold conditions early in the session. And as we continued to move down, you can see the money supply index did move higher here into the close, despite having very similar price action to the previous oversold conditions. So again, indicating that volume was coming in here at the close. You can see this green bar right in the last 15-minute candle, and that ended up being a bullish candle and then a bullish push into the after hours. So once again, NASDAQ looking moderately bullish into the close despite this downtrend that we had here today. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow here on the 4 hour. The Russell continuing to stay consolidated within these two levels. You can see the area of highest volume is still sitting at 188 after today's session, but we're still stuck below that 189 resistance that we had going back to the center point here. This continues to be a decent area to sell options. It continues to hold in this zone. RSI pointing to the upside slightly. MACD basically flat. Slowly trending to the upside on the EMAs of the MACD. But right now, still holding in the zone, waiting for a break one way or the other. Looking at the Dow here, did pop up here after hours. Must have been some earnings or something propping up the markets here. But otherwise, the Dow looked slightly bullish on the day, which was interesting considering that the SPY and the NASDAQ were bearish here today. Area of highest volume still sitting at 331 here. Zoom out, see if it adjusts. Yeah, so this consolidation area before, obviously a ton of volume done in here recently. But if we zoom out even a little bit further, yeah, so this consolidation area up here definitely has the highest volume, but there's some volume happening down here going back to this previous area in December and January before we popped up. And now we're getting some more volume here again recently. Not a ton yet, but it would be good to see it regenerate some volume and then see a push up higher and see if we can sustain that push. Right now, RSI is pointing to some higher prices. We are bullish on the MACD as well. So looking for a little bit of an upswing here on the Dow. Moving over to Apple and Tesla here, starting off with Apple on the 4 hour. Doesn't look great. We did break below the 146 level that we were watching, and we did close below it, so you don't like to see it. Otherwise, you do have the 144 EMA acting as support here. Currently sitting at 144.81, so we haven't quite tested that level yet. You would assume that we'll see that going into tomorrow. Realistically, based on the volume here, you can see we're not really going to see support until we get into this 143 level. You do have the EMA here, but not a lot of volume to support that area, so you would expect an overthrow of that, maybe down to 143.50. Find some support, some buyers in that zone, going back to this area of consolidation. And then you would like to see a push up from there. That would be pretty interesting. Otherwise, RSI looks weak. And overall, Apple looks fairly weak if we don't get a bounce on that 144. Moving over to Tesla, obviously Tesla Investor Day is going to determine where this goes in the after hours and early morning session, but right now still chopping in this zone. You can see all the volume here recently was done in here. Even if we zoom out a little bit, Some volume through here, but tons of volume in this zone. Lots of buyers here at $200.50, right in this zone, pretty much just above support. And that's where we are basically right now. Overall, MACD says bearish. RSI says slightly bearish, but we'll see what Elon has to say during Investor Day. Moving over to transports on the hour and the 4 hour. Looking at the volume first, you can see lots of volume done down here at 228. And then we did bounce from that level into this next area of consolidation, which is good. You definitely like to see that high volume area and then a push higher if you are a bull. Of course, we're stuck here now at the 9 and 21 EMAs, as well as the VWAP, basically all stuck in this zone. We've been chopping in this area for a while, just below the 200 SMA. Lots of volume starting to happen here. If we can get above this 233 level, then we're looking to 236, 237 back in this previous consolidation area. Overall, MACD still showing some bearish price action. RSI on the 4 hour, though, is showing bullish. And similarly on momentum and the 200 SMA, we are showing slightly bullish on transports. So interestingly, slightly bullish on transports in the medium term, but potentially bearish here in the short term. Maybe we get a retest of the 55 EMA down here at 230. If we do get there, you can see not a lot of volume in this area and potentially come back down, fill this gap at 228, and then we can see some more sustained up moves. Couple of scenarios to watch for here on transports, but overall neutral here on transports. Moving over to staples versus discretionary. Once again, staples are falling off a cliff, does not look good. Got all the way down to this 71 level. We've been watching that for a long time. We assumed it would get there, but we were in this holding pattern for so long. If you go back to this previous price action, you can see that's basically at this previous low that we had going back to November. Tested that low here, threw a little bit of a wick to the downside, looks a little bit bullish into the close. Momentum is picking up to the bull side here on the 4 hour after hours. But you can see this is a pretty big down move for consumer staples. Definitely not what you would like to see generally if you are a bear. Usually you want to see this holding fairly steady and consumer staples ripping to the downside, but that's not what we have here yet. Not oversold quite yet on the 4 hour, and we do have a level of support down here at 70.50. This is the longer term trend line. This is that longer term trend line you can see going back many, many months here, going back to this previous close here in October. And that's generally the vicinity that we're in here now. You would expect this to hold if we did get into that level, but we're just not quite there yet. Moving over to discretionary, we moved down to the lows here from Friday and basically held in that area. We have a doji again here on the day. RSI fairly neutral, momentum slightly bearish, but definitely not nearly as bearish as we had here on staples. Moving over to semis, not a lot to add here, basically flat on the day. Pretty choppy throughout the session, but so were the major indices. And overall, basically in the same zone that we've been in for 3 days. Slightly bearish momentum on the hourly, slightly bullish on the 4 hour. So we have mixed indicators here, and we're still holding within this zone that we've been in for a couple of days now. It's worth noting that NVIDIA did announce that they are doing a funding run for about $10 billion, which does include common shares and preferred stock. Not affecting the semiconductor ETF very much, but NVIDIA is a big player in the SPY in the NASDAQ. Moving over to yields, you can see the 2-year and the 10-year on the 4 hour. 2-year making a new high here again today. So we tested that level, found a little bit of resistance, and then rallied up a little bit more, finishing up just below 490. Certainly could push up to that 5 level based on the current trend. Very bullish for continuing to make new highs. Certainly could see a little bit of a sell-off just like we had here where we rallied up really strong, sold off slightly, made a new low, and then made a new high here. Maybe we make a new low back around this previous high at about 480, 485. Then we get a new push up to 495. That would be very bearish for stocks. 2-year still looking very strong. 10-year made a new high just barely. But obviously, both of these are not good for stocks. Looking at the indicators, pretty much everything is bullish. Did get an overbought reading here on the 2-year, which is why I'm saying I think we might get a little bit of a pullback, but you should still continue to expect these to go higher, at least in the short term. Moving over to the dollar on the hour and the 4 hour. Now we have a bearish structure here. So you can see we have a high, a low, a lower high, and a lower low. And this is starting to look fairly weak. On both charts, you can see we touched the 50 line on this pullback on the hourly, and we're starting to sell off here on RSI. We're just slightly above the SMA, which is not what you would want to see. But looking at the 4-hour RSI, definitely bearish. Momentum, definitely bearish. If we come back down here to 103.80, that could potentially be pretty bullish for stocks in tomorrow's session. As long as yields don't go crazy and the dollar is starting to fall, that could give us a little bit of room to the upside. But right now, we should generally expect that conditions are fairly mixed pretty much across the markets. Moving over to JNK on the hour and the 4-hour, you can see we gapped down, pretty much held throughout the session through a wick to the downside, and then stayed pretty much at this 90-60 level. Makes sense based on the volume profile. You can see we were in this area of high volume. We were at that key level, 91.42, pretty much at the close. Get down into that next level of highest volume around 90.60, and then held at that level. If it continues to break down here, there's not a lot of volume in that area right now. You should expect to come down and retest this level down at 89.80, maybe all the way down at 89.60. That would be pretty bearish. It's definitely worth paying attention to that high yields are selling off here a little bit. Looks like an island reversal at this point, kind of a 2-day island reversal where we came up, consolidated for 2 days, and then gapped down. And that's pretty bearish here on JNK, which could potentially lead to more downside price action if this continues to break down here. Moving over to the VIX here on the 15-minute and the hourly, I just want to highlight how choppy this was here today. You can see it was all over the place, all the way down to 2027 after being at around 2015 yesterday. Got all the way up here to 2132, big spikes throughout the session, and then got all the way back down to about 2050 to close. Didn't really give any clear direction throughout the session. Did rise slightly compared to yesterday. But moving over to the daily chart, you can see we do have a wick rejection to the upside. You would think this is going to move down based on the price action that we had on the daily chart. Momentum is also moving down here. And like I said before, I'm still expecting around a 1950 in terms of a bottom for this down move. I do think we're going to go a little bit lower on the VIX, but that's in the daily chart is still telling us that that is a possibility. Moving over to my accounts, I actually held up fairly well considering that the NASDAQ was down almost 1% here today, only down about $150 or so. IWM continues to hold up well, so I'm making money on that account. I did sell another put here down at 186 for the Friday close. You can see a small profit there. Looking to buy the stock at about $3 lower than it is right now if you include that 50-cent credit. I'm going to allow this 100 shares to go on this 188 call. Managed to make good money on the call as well as the shares. That's a perfect close here for me on the IWM. Certainly doesn't always happen that way, so that's nice to see. Looking at the NASDAQ, I did pick up a couple of puts here at the close. Pretty good price, actually. 290 puts for $1. So pretty much right at the lows. Pretty solid entry there. Like I said, I do think we'll get some bullish price action tomorrow, and I'll continue to trade either futures or NASDAQ shares to maximize short-term opportunities and generally to the bullish side for tomorrow. I think I'm going to maximize options for swing trading and not hold shares overnight in my individual account. That'll allow me to do a little bit more day trading with shares and reduce my expenses in terms of futures prices. So it's just part of my strategy that I'm doing right now and trying to get a little bit better and more efficient with that. It seemed to work out fairly well today. I think I made about $200 on my day trading, which helped pare down some of the losses. I had some really bullish positions going into the day, and it was a pretty bearish day, so I did have to play quite a bit of defense, and that worked out fairly well throughout the session. Otherwise, like I said, moderately bullish going into tomorrow and looking for opportunities really in either direction. Let me know down in the comments section what you think the markets are going to do tomorrow or what you think Elon Musk is going to say at Tesla Day. Otherwise, definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.